but I'll only be sending any recordings of me. It won't have anything you say or any pictures of you in it. So some people are a bit surprised when there's such an emphasis in mindfulness training on working with our bodies. Perhaps not surprising given the word in English is mindfulness. You know, kind of there's often the idea that we're going to be working with the mind, which is true, we are working with the mind. But one of the main ways that we work with the mind is actually to bring attention to our bodies. In fact, I don't tend to use the phrase mind all that much. I tend to say mind-body because it's a system. It's not like we could just got to cut ourselves off at the head. And there's this mental bit up here and this physical bit down there, and never the twain shall meet. Clearly, our mental life and our physical life are deeply intertwined. But we don't always act like that. It's the famous line from James Joyce's The Dubliners, where he talks about the character Mr. Duffy. So Mr. Duffy lived a few feet from his body. It's kind of that sense of being kind of out there somewhere, and the body's over here. And it's a separateness. And yet it's an artificial separateness, because we are inevitably an interconnected system. So why so much attention on the body part of the mind-body process? Well, I guess largely it's about restoring balance, because we do have this habit of being disembodied, of being kind of like minds on sticks. And, particularly perhaps when we get under stress, there's a tendency for many of us to default up to here, into thinking. Thinking is the place where attempted fixing happens, and problem solving, and ruminating, and worrying, and fantasizing, and remembering. All of which is fine sometimes, but can take us away from the direct, bare experience of the present moment. At least in a sense of the feeling tone of it. And so the body becomes an anchor. The body is a really helpful anchor for bringing our attention back to, apart from anything else, it's here. It's really here. It's kind of like it's a solid form. It has weight to it. It's almost like being, like a paperweight, it's like the body can be a bit like a paperweight for the mind. Okay, let's just hold this, let's just drop this down here. And it's not that the mind doesn't wander, but having the body to come back to gives it that sense of perhaps of steadiness. So the body can be a steadying anchor when the tendency is supposed to default to the abstract, to mind wandering, to split off from the lived experience of now, rather than be actually here with what's present. We live in a world often of ideas. So so the body's a kind of a home base, an anchor. It's also a shift in approach. There's a kind of sense of the how of our attention. So the what is, where do we come to? We come back into our bodies, perhaps to the breath, to the feet, to the hands, wherever we choose as an anchor. But there's also a quality experience when we're working with the body, the quality of shifting from conceptualizing into sensing. So if we're paying attention to our body, that has to be a sensory experience, because the body doesn't think. If we're thinking about our body, we're not in our body. We're thinking about our body. But if we're actually feeling and tuning into the experience of our bodies, we cannot not be in the present moment. Yeah, that's right, double negative. We cannot not be in the present moment, because the body is always here and now. It's never tomorrow's body, yesterday's body. It's always now. So there's a quality of shifting into the different mode of mind that mindfulness invites, just by virtue of coming back to this physical anchor. And it frees us from, if we are just paying attention to how things are, the ringing in my ear, the pleasure in the tummy after a good meal, the pain in the shoulders, whether it's settling or calm. And I'm just reading a few of the things that you mentioned in the chat earlier. Whatever they are, if we can just kind of state them, like, yes, this is happening, without needing to analyze or create thinking about them, then we are unhooked from the judging and comparing mind, which can cause us so much stress. So the body is a vital tool in our letting go of judgment, even though we may well have judgments about our bodies, things that we don't like. But then those judgments come from thinking, not from the body itself. The body just is what it is. So the body is an anchor, shift in approach, invites a shift in approach. It's direct experience. So the body's in direct contact with the world around. We can actually touch the world through this body. And that might invite a quality of appreciation, even though we may not always like everything that is in our body. Just the very, very experience of being in touch happens through the body. All of our senses. So that might invite a quality of gratitude if we are really paying attention. Just the magic and the amazingness, if that's a word, of being embodied. The miracle of speech, the miracle of feeling the feet, the miracle of walking. All of this, invites a quality of wonder. If we really pay in touch, like DNA, that's pretty amazing. I know we don't see it, but we know it's in there. The cells of our body's being fed by oxygen moment by moment. I'm still fascinated by the body's capacity to repair itself. Anybody else have this? Like when you get a wound and it just it just gets better. I know, sometimes it takes time and sometimes not completely, but just like a cut on the skin. I've got a cut on my thumb at the moment, and it's like a couple of days ago, I just cut myself with a kitchen knife, and it's gradually healing by itself. I'm not doing anything. That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So just the sort of quality of the miracle of the body might invite appreciation and wonder and gratitude, which are all really helpful approaches to bring when we're in mindfulness training. It's also a sort of a model of life, that actually a lot of times if we just let be, then the body works well by itself. While we're alive, we're breathing. We don't have to remember to breathe. The body's always changing. It's not fully in our control, but we have some influence over it. So there's a quality of it shows us the way of life, kind of the nature's way, the nature of which we're a part. And these processes of change, of influence, but not having complete control, of being deeply affected by our environments, and what we put into the body in terms of food and drink and air and so on. So it's like a study. The body. We could pay attention to the body and study how it works, and then realize that actually this is kind of how in many ways, it's how the whole of the world works. And if we can understand and appreciate how the whole of the world works, maybe we've got more capacity to be wise as we live in it, live in the body and in the world. The body is also a very helpful radar. Sometimes we talk about this in early stages of an 8-week mindfulness course. The body is a radar. It's and if we can actually look at this radar, it gives us so much information about how we are and what's going on. And if we ignore it or aren't aware of it, our body can we can get into trouble. We may not notice the early signs of stress or pain or illness. The body gives us messages that if we're paying attention to, we can respond to. A sense of synchronization if we're paying attention to our body. Whereas our minds can tell us all sorts of stories about what's going on. It's perhaps not so helpful. So the body is a radar. Someone's just kind of come on board. Looks like a double booking on the room. So I'm just going to come back into my body now, noticing how kind of like, interruption. Oh, what was that all about? Did I book the room correctly? Was I right? Were they right? Like, woo, shh. Okay, so what do I need? I need to come back into my body. So this is a really helpful example, just of kind of how when something like, something unexpected happens, something could be potentially be jarring. It's like, okay, that's life. And right here, I'm here with you now, still breathing, still got my weight on the ground, and the mind starts to settle. Slowly perhaps, but it starts to settle. The final quality of embodiment, at least that, I'm sure there are others, but that kind of came to me as I was wondering about what to say, was the quality of wholeness, coherence. And this, I suppose, relates to the first example that I mentioned about anchoring. That by anchoring, we're coming back into our sense of home in the body, and the sense of separateness that can come when kind of like the mind defaults up into thinking and ignoring the body. So when we return to the anchor, it's a kind of like recovery of a coherence, a wholeness, an alignment of mind and body. The traditional image for this in meditation practice is the rider on the horse. So it's kind of like we've got this sort of directive quality, the mind that can see in front and make decisions and steer. But that's no help at all without the horse to ride on. And the horse is the body. And these two come together. And if we can be in synchronization, in harmony, there's a coherence. So the rider can't ride without the horse, and the horse is kind of directionless without the rider. So we come into that sense of wholeness when we're able to bring mind and body together. And yet, of course, habitually, we're trained to either fight or get rid of, particularly if there's pain in the body, if the body's not giving us what we want. Kind of like it's of course, nobody wants unpleasant experiences in the body. So one of the ways of trying to dismiss that, at least in the short term, is to take our attention somewhere else. And it can work in the short term. But if pain is chronic or ongoing, then at some point we have to find a way to live with it. This is the whole basis of John Kabat-Zinn's stress reduction program 40 years ago, how to help people to learn to live with pain, live with difficult experiences. In fact, this is a quote from him. So he said, only through the acceptance of the actuality of the present, no matter how painful or frightening or undesirable it may be, that it is only through the acceptance of all of that change and growth and healing can come about. Actually, the word healing itself means wholeness. So by healing, when we're talking about mindfulness in the body, we're not meaning necessarily the kind of healing that happens in my thumb, where it gets better and there's a cure and it's all great and I don't have to do anything. There's another kind of healing that actually comes from that synchronization of mind into body. So those are some of my thoughts about the benefits of training attention over and over, because it does take a repeated work to come to be friends with this body once again. For those of us who've somehow got out of regulation or out of friendship with our own bodies. These are some of my thoughts. I'm going to stop the recording and be really interested if anybody wants to add anything to that, or has any comments on what I've said, or if there's anything I've missed.